For more on Israel's strike on Beirut, Sara Yael Hirschhorn joins us now from Jerusalem. She's a historian at the University of Haifa and a fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Good to see you again, Sara. What's your reaction to the killing of Nasrallah and where you think it takes us?
Well, it's certainly a very historic moment in Israel, and the mood here is higher than it's been in several weeks, especially because there's been no progress on the Gaza ceasefire, and as eyes have turned to the Lebanese front, I think most of the Israeli public, as well as the Israeli defense establishment, clearly sees more potential for resolving the crisis on the northern border, and hopefully, with the decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership, perhaps the ability to forego a ground invasion that would still allow residents in the north, over 60,000 displaced Israelis, to return to their homes. So I think the mood here is quite high, although the future remains unseen. Some of your other commentators have mentioned the succession crisis in Hezbollah and what this may mean for larger escalation or retaliation. But I think Israelis feel that they've bought themselves some time and some space to find a solution for the northern front.
You mentioned a ground operation. If Israel is preparing for this, some in Lebanon believe that an in-ground war with Hezbollah could negate some of Israel's military strengths. Is there a risk of actually making Israel more insecure in this process?
Certainly. Israel obviously is still occupied in Gaza. It has a tense border in the West Bank, and then would also be draining resources if it decides to go for a full-scale ground invasion in Lebanon. I suspect that these targeted assassinations have been a method to allow the army to use aerial power rather than ground forces to achieve some of the same aims, which is essentially to allow the northern community members to return to their homes. But it's uncertain whether that would be sufficient to allow citizens to return to their homes without fear of rocket fire. So we'll have to see. I personally know relatives and family members who've been called up to the front in the north. And so it's unclear whether a full-scale ground invasion will be going ahead or not, but certainly it seems that Israel is amassing some of its resources at the northern border. Whether to just protect them from within Israel or to invade is yet unclear. But I think it all depends on what will happen in the next days and perhaps weeks in terms of Hezbollah being able to reconstitute itself, what kind of retaliation will be undertaken. Will Iran join in this in these attacks as it did last April, which will be a much more significant development, and whether, and essentially what will be needed for residents in northern communities to feel that they can return to their homes safely, and for the economy to return to that region.
So what does the IDF or Israel's military need in order to ensure enough resources? How tired is it, given there's been a nearly year-long war in Gaza already? And how much does Israel need from the US? What kind of support is Israel expecting and likely to receive?
Well, thus far, it doesn't seem that the United States was notified about the assassination of Nasrallah, or what has been conventionally now called Beepergate, of the attacks on Hezbollah leaders who held these beepers as part of their role in the command structure. So thus far, it seems that the United States has been mostly out of the loop. What Israel may need going forward would really depend on what is necessary.
Why is the US out of the loop here, given it is funding Israel so heavily with its arsenal? Why is the US continually being left out of the loop?
Well, there's a lot of rumors going around about why that is. One is that Israel, of course, wanted to have the element of surprise in these attacks, and notifying the United States may have prevented the timeliness of that, particularly as Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking in the United Nations right around the time the go-ahead was given to assassinate Nasrallah. So perhaps there was the element of surprise. But I think the beeper question is, the rumor surrounding the beeper question was that Hezbollah command had somehow discovered this scheme, and Israel had no choice but to, in its own mind, or in the eyes of its military commanders, but to operationalize this program to blow up the beepers, lest the whole system be discovered. So perhaps there was also, again, a shortage of time. But I think the United States and Israel are clearly on separate pages when it comes to deterrence, particularly with Iran and its proxies, so close to the United States elections, and that Israel has made its own calculation that it may need to pursue its own agenda at this sensitive moment.
As you say, there seems to be a sense of elation in Israel regarding this strike and the death of Nasrallah. How big of a push is this by Israel? What does it mean, especially when you're coming off the back of a war in Gaza, that the horrific consequences, of course, of October 7th and something that Israel wasn't expecting and launched into a war. But conditions between Hezbollah and Israel have been continually strained. Of course, the war of 2006 was left unfinished. Was Israel always preparing for this? Were they ready for this? And was this an opportunity that they saw to take out Nasrallah, regardless of what was happening in Gaza?
Yes, the timing of the assassination of Nasrallah is quite curious. Had Israel had this intelligence for weeks, months, or even years about his location and only suddenly decided now to carry out this assassination? That is something that I don't know. But it does seem that Israel had always been prepared for a much more protracted conflict on the northern front, and that's in many ways why it was left so unprepared for October 7th and the Hamas invasion of the southern communities, was because it had always had its eyes focused on what it perceived as the more organized and dangerous threat from Hezbollah. So certainly Israel, if it saw an opportunity to assassinate Nasrallah or to operationalize the beeper mission or to do other activities that would decapitate the Hamas command structure, clearly saw a rationale to do so. And I think with the symbolic date of October 7th approaching only next week, Israel also feels a psychological or symbolic need to at least show the Israeli public a sense of strength. I wouldn't say that the Israeli public is elated tonight. I think that they are. But I think they do recognize that very bad people have now are no longer walking the face of the planet, and there is a sense of security in that.
Yet Israel keeps saying that it's fighting for its own safety and security. The US has been pushing Israel for a diplomatic solution. Also trying to get Netanyahu to sign a ceasefire, yet he won't do it. Why will Netanyahu continue to keep the temperature high, given that there's this ongoing threat of a regional war, which makes no one safe? And if Israel's fighting for its safety and a regional war starts to erupt between Iran, Israel, and the US, then that could be a huge risk to the lives of Israelis. Is Netanyahu the problem here?
I think to some extent Netanyahu is the problem. Certainly there are rumors coming directly from the military and intelligence establishment that Netanyahu has abrogated various deals or has been obstructive in this process. But I think any Israeli leader from left to right would also make somewhat similar decisions when it came to the safety of the Israeli public. And I think there is well-founded sentiment that a ceasefire both in Gaza and Lebanon would not necessarily secure the northern or southern borders, and that further military action needed to be taken before a ceasefire could be concluded. And this is the path that Netanyahu has chosen at this time.
All right, Sarah, we'll leave it there. Really appreciate your time. Sara Yael Hirschhorn.